I wasn't supposed to see the message. It popped up on my sister's iPad while I was babysitting her dog, something I did often, unpaid, because we're family. That word, family, was starting to feel slippery, like it meant one thing when they needed something, and another when I needed to matter. The group chat was named Beach Bash 2025. I stared at it for a few seconds before opening the message, unsure if I'd regret it. Inside were dozens of texts, plans about a beach house in North Carolina, lists of snacks, who would bring board games, a shared Google Doc for carpool assignments. There was even a poll about whether they should order matching shirts. My name didn't appear once, and it wasn't like I'd missed an earlier invite. I checked again, scrolling. Nothing. They had all decided to go on a trip together. My parents, my brother, both my sisters, their kids, even 2 of our cousins from Florida. And no one had told me. It wasn't just an oversight. It was deliberate. Before I tell you how I pulled off something outrageous to teach them a lesson, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because this story only gets crazier from here. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe they assumed I couldn't come. I had missed a couple of family dinners recently due to work, teaching 3 back-to-back art classes and picking up shifts at the bookstore to make rent. But I'd always texted, always apologized, always offered to reschedule. Still, no one said a word about a beach trip. I kept reading the messages. My sister Jenny had booked the Airbnb. She even joked in one text, "Let's hope this place has enough wine glasses for Mum's vacation pause." My brother Chris was organizing the car rides. We'll have to leave by 7 a.m. Sharp. No delays this time, please. My dad had replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That man who never texts back had chimed in for this. The Airbnb confirmation was buried in a thread. I don't know how it got synced to the iPad, but there it was, an email with a long listing, photos of a massive white house near the dunes, wraparound porches, an outdoor grill, 10 beds, 10. I counted them again. 10 people going, 10 beds, no extras, not even a couch for me. I sat in Jenny's living room for an hour, petting her golden doodle, staring at the wall while thoughts collided in my head. Anger, sadness, shame. I wasn't even angry that I wasn't going. I was angry that no one thought to include me, not even as a formality. Not even a, "Hey, we're going away, thought you should know." I remembered birthdays where they forgot to invite me until the day of. The time they moved our family group photo session to a different day without telling me. How Mom always told me I was too sensitive when I brought these things up. I didn't bring them up anymore. I got good at shrinking. At understanding why they left me out. "Oh, you live too far," or "We didn't think you'd want to come," or "You always say no anyway, so we figured." It was easier for them that way. And I let them. For years. But something about this hurt differently. It wasn't just a gathering, it was a full vacation, a week-long escape. And I was erased from it like I'd never existed in the family chat. I reread the Airbnb listing. A beautiful 3-story beach home with nautical decor, private beach access, and a fire pit. There was even a hammock. My chest burned. I didn't message anyone. I didn't ask why I wasn't invited. I didn't cry. I just stared at that confirmation email, copied the listing link into my browser and read every detail. Then, I had a thought I'd never had before. What if I went there anyway? Not with them, not to confront them, but just what if I went? I could book it under someone else's name. The system wouldn't flag it. It was a private listing, not a hotel. If I got there first, if I was already staying in the house, they couldn't kick me out. Not legally. I imagined their faces, confused, frustrated. Having to scramble for a last-minute motel because the house they thought was theirs was already occupied by me. The thought made me smile, just a little. I felt guilty for smiling, but the idea didn't leave me. In fact, it rooted deeper the longer I sat there. If they weren't going to treat me like part of the family, maybe I didn't need to act like it either. Maybe this time I wouldn't just let it go. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying the group chat, every emoji, every exclamation point that wasn't meant for me. I kept hearing my sister's voice in my head, laughing as she texted something like, "So excited! This is going to be the best family trip yet." Best family trip, just without me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they really thought I was too busy. Maybe they just assumed I'd say no. But no matter how I spun it, I kept coming back to the same fact. They didn't even bother to ask. That hurt more than any argument we'd ever had. The next morning, I opened my laptop and typed in the listing from the email. It was still up, same dates, same photos. Same giant porch wrapped around the front of the house like an invitation. I clicked through the pictures slowly, taking in every detail. The white and blue coastal kitchen, the airy bedrooms, the backyard with a fire pit already stacked with wood. It looked like something out of a catalogue, exactly the kind of place my mum would rave about. Then I scrolled to the calendar. The dates my family had reserved were blocked out, but something strange happened. When I clicked on Message Host, it didn't show any indication that the reservation had been finalized under my sister's name. There was no linked account or guest ID visible, just a blank interface like I could still reach out. I paused, heart pounding. What if I made a new account, one with a different email? A new name? I hesitated. It was extreme, petty, ridiculous. But it wasn't like I was stealing anything. I wouldn't hack anything. I'd just be faster. Use their own lack of consideration as my opportunity. Their reservation hadn't been communicated directly to me, so from my perspective, it wasn't mine to honor. I stared at the sign-up page for a while, then I typed Alexis Ford. It was a name I'd used once before in college, for a prank email to a professor who'd made a sexist remark. Felt fitting. I created a Gmail, booked a virtual debit card, rented a P.O. box just to verify it. The entire thing took 3 hours, but by the end of it I was Alexis Ford from Philadelphia, looking to book a peaceful beach getaway. I messaged the host. Said I'd seen the listing and wanted to know if there'd been any cancellations for the dates June 10th to June 17th. I acted sweet, respectful, told them I'd just ended a long-term relationship and needed some time to myself by the water. They replied within an hour. Hi Alexis, actually, a previous booking just fell through and those dates are now available again. Let me know if you'd like to book. My hands started trembling. I looked back at the group chat. They were still talking about the road trip, still unaware that their rental had mysteriously opened up. Jenny must not have gotten the cancellation notice yet. Maybe she didn't see it. Maybe she booked through a third-party app that hadn't updated. It didn't matter. I had a tiny window. I clicked Book Now and confirmed everything. Payment went through, the listing changed. Booked June 10th to June 17th. The house was mine. For a full minute, I just sat there, stunned. What had I done? What if they figured it out? What if Jenny called the host and found out some woman named Alexis Ford had swiped the house from under her? But that part didn't scare me as much as it excited me. They had excluded me, erased me, treated me like background noise. And now, for the first time in years, I felt like I had done something bold. Not to hurt them, at least not entirely, but to say, I see what you did. And I'm not pretending it didn't happen anymore. I started preparing that same day, took time off work, packed my suitcase, bought sunscreen, snacks, a new swimsuit. Everything they would have done, but now for me. Only me. That night I laid out my clothes and thought, what if I really pull this off? What if I get there first, and they show up to find me already there? I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't fight. I'd just be calm, collected, ready. They made their decision. Now I was making mine. I left before sunrise. The drive took 6 hours. I played music the entire way, windows down, letting the salty air creep in as I got closer to the coast. My nerves buzzed beneath every song, but I didn't turn back. I had done reckless things before, but never something this deliberate, never something this personal. The house was even more beautiful in person. 3 stories of white wood and sky blue shutters, perched on a slight hill above the dunes. It looked like the kind of place where people made memories, or at least pretended to. I parked my car around the back like a real guest would. The host had left a code in the app. I entered it and stepped inside. The air was cool and clean. Coastal decor everywhere. Model sailboats, sand-colored rugs, glass jars filled with seashells. It was pristine, like no one had touched it in weeks. I wandered through the rooms in silence, running my fingers along the kitchen counter, pausing in front of framed photos of lighthouses and old fishermen. I stood in the living room and thought, this is mine for a week. I chose the biggest bedroom, the one with a balcony that overlooked the beach. I threw my bag on the king-sized bed and opened the windows wide, letting the wind in. I sat there for a long time, just breathing, letting the panic slowly dissolve. For the first 2 days, it was almost too perfect. I cooked whatever I wanted, made pancakes for dinner, drank wine before noon. I danced barefoot in the hallway. I took long showers and sang badly. I blasted music while folding laundry no one else had touched. I even tried the hammock in the backyard and fell asleep with a book on my chest. There was a strange kind of freedom in knowing no one expected anything from me. But the pettiness crept in anyway. I found the guest book and wrote, "Thanks for the peaceful stay. Alexis F." right on the first page. In the fridge, I left a sticky note that said, "Don't forget your sunscreen," and signed it with a smiley face. I wasn't sure who I was taunting, the host, my sister, myself, but it felt oddly satisfying. I rearranged a few things too, nothing major, just enough. The throw pillows in the living room, flipped. The fruit bowl. I replaced the apples with limes. In one of the guest bedrooms, I turned all the hangers backward. In the bunk room with the twin beds, obviously for the kids, I swapped the fitted sheets around. Harmless chaos. It wasn't about ruining the house. It was about taking ownership. They didn't want me there, so I made sure I left my mark anyway. By the third night, I started watching the time. I knew when they were supposed to arrive. Saturday afternoon, around 4 p.m. if traffic was kind. I imagined their route, the playlist Jenny would force everyone to listen to, the snacks packed in Ziploc bags. I could see them so clearly, it almost felt like I was still part of it. Almost. I set my alarm that morning, even though I barely slept. I made coffee, sat on the front porch, and waited. Every car that passed made my heart stutter. I told myself I had every right to be there. I had the booking, the keys, the confirmation email, but I couldn't deny the tightness in my chest. Was this really about making a statement? Or was I just trying to be noticed? At noon, I took a walk down the beach. The waves were calm, barely a whisper against the sand. I watched kids flying kites, couples lounging under umbrellas. No one knew what I was doing. No one cared. That made it easier and harder all at once. When I returned, the sun was dipping just slightly, casting long shadows across the porch. Still quiet, still mine. I sat on the living room couch, waiting, heart pounding harder with every minute that passed. They were coming, and I was already home. I heard them before I saw them. Laughter, footsteps on gravel, the rolling of suitcases. That familiar mix of excitement and noise only my family could bring. My stomach twisted. I stood up slowly, heart thudding in my chest, and peeked through the front window. There they were. Jenny was first, wearing a big straw hat, leading the charge with her phone in one hand and a Starbucks in the other. Behind her came Chris, dragging 2 coolers. Mum and Dad followed, moving slower, Dad holding a folded lawn chair like it was treasure. The cousins trailed close, chattering, already arguing about who would get which room. No one looked worried. No one seemed to realize yet. I stepped back from the window and breathed in, once, deep and slow. This was it. This was the moment everything collided. I didn't plan some dramatic confrontation. I just unlocked the door, opened it and waited. It took them a few seconds to register me. Jenny stopped mid-step, her mouth opened slightly, eyes squinting like she wasn't sure if I was real or some kind of mirage brought on by heat stroke. Chris looked confused. Mom blinked several times. Then silence fell over the group, like someone had muted the scene. Jenny was the first to speak. "What are you doing here?" I shrugged. "Checking in." "You're already inside," Chris said, eyes narrowing. "How?" "I booked it," I replied. "Under Alexis Ford. Whole week." Jenny's eyebrows shot up. "That's not possible. I booked it months ago." "Looks like something went wrong," I said calmly. "You can check with the host if you want." She pulled out her phone immediately. I knew what she'd find. A cancellation notice sent 2 days ago. I hadn't done anything to cause it, just claimed the opening before she saw it. The universe, or maybe just her own disorganization, did the rest. Chris looked from me to Jenny. Wait, what is going on? I had this booked. This was supposed to be our trip. Jenny's voice cracked on the last word. I stayed on the porch, arms crossed. Funny, I didn't get an invite. You're being petty, Mum said suddenly, sharp and defensive. This isn't how you handle being hurt. That stung. It always came down to that. Me being the problem. Me reacting wrong. Not the action that caused it. I didn't do anything illegal, I said. I saw the house was available and I booked it, just like anyone could have. Dad muttered something under his breath. I caught one word. Unbelievable. Chris stepped forward. So what? You came here to what? Punish us? No, I said, my voice steady. I came here because I wanted a vacation, and I saw the perfect house. It just happened to be the same one you didn't think I needed to know about. Jenny was still on her phone, scrolling furiously, mumbling about confirmation emails and refunds. One of the cousins, Olivia, looked genuinely confused. Wait, you weren't invited? I looked at her directly. No, not even mentioned. She looked down, cheeks flushing. That was the first real crack in their unity I'd seen. The rest of them started whispering, arguing in low voices. They moved a few feet away, huddling near the trunk of the car, as if being farther from me would make it easier to sort through the chaos. But the tension was already baked in. They had assumed they could just arrive and claim the space like they always did, claim the moment, the energy, the narrative. But this time I had rewritten the story. Jenny stomped back up to the porch. Okay, you've made your point. Can we at least come in and figure this out together? I tilted my head. Figure what out? I booked this house. I'm staying here. Mom's jaw clenched. So you're kicking your entire family out on purpose? I'm not kicking anyone out, I said. I just got here first. Chris groaned and turned away. The cousins started pulling their bags back toward the car. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt present, seen. They didn't have a backup plan. They hadn't considered that something might go wrong, just like they hadn't considered me. And now they had to figure it out, just like I always had. No one said much after that. They stood outside for a while, talking in hushed tones I couldn't quite hear through the closed door. I watched from the living room window, my arms crossed tight, unsure if I felt vindicated or just tired. The adrenaline was already starting to wear off, leaving something heavier in its place. Eventually, they began to scatter. Chris slammed the trunk shut and drove off first, his kids still bickering in the back seat. Jenny tried calling someone, probably customer support, pacing back and forth by the mailbox until she finally gave up and kicked a patch of grass. Mum and Dad lingered the longest. Dad looked exhausted. Mum kept glancing at the house like she still couldn't believe it. Then she turned away without a word. By 5, the driveway was empty. I sat back down on the couch and stared at the fireplace. I wasn't sure what I'd expected. Apologies? A blow-up fight? Some dramatic gesture where someone finally realized how much I'd been left out over the years. Instead, they'd all just left. An hour later, Jenny texted me. I hope you're proud of yourself. You ruined something that was supposed to bring us together. I didn't respond. What could I say that would matter? But the text sat in my phone like a stain, replaying over and over, as if I was the one who'd broken something, as if I had hijacked joy rather than reclaimed space that was never offered to me in the first place. Then came another message from Mom. I'm disappointed. We could have figured this out. I stared at that one longer. Disappointed. That was the word she always used when I didn't shrink quietly, when I spoke up in ways that made her uncomfortable. It was her version of how dare you have needs. Still, I didn't answer. Not yet. I spent that night alone in the house. The silence was sharp. I made myself dinner and watched a movie, but everything felt off. The glow of satisfaction I'd expected never came. I didn't regret what I'd done, but I wasn't celebrating either. Around 9, I got a knock at the door. For a second, I thought it might be Jenny again, ready to argue face to face. I braced myself and opened it. It was Olivia. She stood there holding a bag of chips and a six-pack of soda, eyes soft, no accusations on her face. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She looked over her shoulder, then back at me. "They all went to some cheap motel near the pier. It's a mess." I stepped aside and let her in without saying anything. She dropped the bag on the kitchen counter and sat on a stool. "This was really messed up. Them leaving you out. I didn't even realize you weren't coming until the last minute." I didn't respond right away. I poured us both glasses of soda and sat across from her. "I'm not surprised," I said finally. "No one ever does." Olivia frowned. "I'm sorry, for real. It's not right." I nodded. "It's not just this trip. It's everything. It's years of birthdays, dinners, group chats. Always being forgotten. Always being the afterthought." She was quiet, but she didn't look away. "I think some of us knew," she said, "but we didn't say anything. It's easier not to. Doesn't make it okay, though." I appreciated her honesty more than I could say. We sat in the kitchen for a long time, just talking. About nothing. About everything. The soda went flat, the chips got stale. But for the first time, I felt like someone actually saw me. When Olivia finally left, she hugged me tight. "You were right to do this," she said before walking out. And for the first time that day, I believed it. The next morning, the house felt different. Quieter, heavier, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. I moved slowly through the rooms, not touching much, just observing. I paused by the staircase and ran my fingers along the polished wood. Even the silence seemed to carry memories that didn't belong to me. It gave me space to think. About everything. The more I let the quiet sink in, the more memories came back. Little ones, the kind you don't even realize matter until you start adding them up. Like the time I waited 2 hours at a restaurant for my family to show up, only to find out the dinner had been moved. Jenny said she forgot to tell me. Chris didn't even remember I was invited, or how I learned about my cousin's engagement through Instagram weeks after the party. Mom had gone, taken photos, smiled in everyone. I hadn't even gotten a text. It was always things like that. I used to tell myself it wasn't malicious, that people get busy, life gets chaotic, and I wasn't entitled to constant attention. But over time, being forgotten stopped feeling like an accident and started feeling like a pattern, one that quietly convinced me I wasn't important enough to include. And when I finally did bring it up, I was always told I was overthinking or taking things too personally. I could still hear Mom saying it. She said it a lot. Even when I was a kid, her attention always felt distracted. Like I had to earn it by being perfect, quiet, helpful, unbothersome. If I needed too much, if I got emotional, I became a problem. So I learned not to need, not to want. I became the easy child. Dad wasn't much better. He showed up when it was convenient, at school plays when he had time, at birthdays if he wasn't working. I told myself he loved me in his own way, but that way always seemed to involve distance. And I played along. I was the one who adapted, who said, "It's okay, don't worry about it," every time something was missed or rescheduled. I made excuses for everyone, so often I forgot to stop and ask what I deserved in return. I never pushed back, never made a scene, until now. I walked into the guest bedroom that morning, the one with the twin beds, and sat on the edge of the mattress, the same one Olivia had sat on the night before. I thought about what she said. Some of us knew. That haunted me more than anything, because it meant I hadn't been imagining it, that the exclusion wasn't just in my head. They saw it and chose silence. I laid back and stared at the ceiling. There was a tiny crack near the light fixture, barely visible, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, like the fractures in our family. Small, but deep, easily ignored until you looked closely. I thought about calling someone, maybe Olivia, maybe no one. The truth was, I didn't need a resolution, not right now. What I needed was clarity. And I was finally getting it. For years, I'd played the role they gave me, quiet, reliable, invisible when necessary. I showed up. I helped move furniture. I watered plants, dog sat, filled in for babysitting shifts. I made everything easier. But when it came time to be included, to be seen, they simply didn't reach back. I stood and looked out the window. The ocean was calm, almost too calm. Like it didn't care about the chaos I carried, like it was daring me to let it all go. And maybe for the first time I could. Not for them, but for me. This house, this moment, wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about recognition. I had drawn a boundary. I had taken up space unapologetically. And no matter what they thought of it, they couldn't undo the fact that I existed, that I mattered. I left the room and walked through the house again, slower this time, letting myself feel the weight of every step. It was late afternoon when I heard another knock. This time I didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. I was too tired for another confrontation. I opened the door slowly, half expecting one of my parents, maybe even Jenny again, ready to vent more disappointment. But it was Olivia. She wore the same hoodie from the night before, hair pulled into a messy bun. No bags, no drama, just her. "I brought food," she said, holding up a takeout bag from the seafood shack down the road. "Thought you might be sick of eating alone." I stepped aside silently and let her in. We sat at the kitchen table again, but this time felt different. There was no tension, no sense of intrusion. Just quiet, steady familiarity. She passed me a box of crab cakes and a small container of coleslaw, then started opening her own. "They all think you went crazy," she said after a few bites. I didn't flinch. "I figured. But I told them they were wrong," she added, her voice calm. "I said maybe the only crazy thing was how long you let them treat you like that." I stared at her, not sure how to respond. She shrugged. "You were always the one who got stuck with the extra chair at dinner, the one who had to ask for updates instead of being told. I noticed it. I just didn't want to be the one to say anything." I looked down at my food. "Why not?" "Because it's easier to be part of the group," she said honestly. "You speak up and suddenly you're starting drama, but staying quiet, that keeps you safe." I nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." She picked at her crab cake for a moment, then said, "I always thought you were the strongest one. You just kept showing up even when no one deserved it." That stopped me. I'd never thought of myself that way. I'd always seen my silence as weakness, my accommodation as surrender. But maybe there had been a kind of quiet resilience in staying, in hoping, in showing up despite being overlooked. "I didn't do this to hurt anyone," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why it worked. We talked for hours, not just about the trip or the fallout, but about everything. Her college plans, her strained relationship with her mum, how sometimes being part of the family meant pretending you weren't hurting just to keep the peace. At one point, I told her about the birthday when no one showed up. I hadn't said it out loud in years. She looked at me like I was telling her the ending to a mystery she hadn't realized she was part of. "I remember that," she whispered. "I didn't come either." "You were 13, I said. "It wasn't your fault." Still, she looked guilty. It wasn't about blame. It was about acknowledgement. For the first time, someone wasn't making excuses. She wasn't trying to reframe the story or diminish my pain. She was just listening, and that felt bigger than any apology. After a while, we cleaned up the food and made tea. She walked through the house like she belonged there, like we both did. She paused in the hallway outside the master bedroom and turned to me. "This house is beautiful," she said. I nodded. "It's the kind of place I always thought we'd share, as a family." She looked at me gently. "Maybe someday. A better version of us anyway." We ended the night on the back porch, listening to the ocean. The breeze was cool but not biting. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and Olivia sat beside me without speaking. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a beginning. A small, fragile bridge between who I'd been and who I was trying to become. Between the girl who stayed silent and the woman who rented the whole damn house to prove she deserved a place in it. When she stood to leave, Olivia hugged me again. "Next time," she said, "don't wait for someone to invite you, just show up." I watched her walk down the steps and into the night, heart full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First it was Chris, then Jenny, then Mom. I didn't open the messages right away. I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched the tide pull away from the shore. I wanted to enjoy 5 more minutes of peace before diving back into the storm. When I finally looked, the group chat had exploded. Messages piled on top of each other, a full scroll of confusion, guilt, and damage control. Jenny: "What exactly did you say to Olivia?" Chris: "So now we're the bad guys?" Mom: "I don't appreciate being portrayed as someone who abandoned her child." That one stung the most. But then came Olivia's messages, in a separate thread. I didn't tell them anything that wasn't true, they just don't like hearing it. I smiled just a little. Apparently, after she left the night before, she'd gone back to the motel. Someone asked where she'd been and she told them everything. Not just that I had booked the house, but why. How I'd been pushed aside for years. How no one had acknowledged me until it was too late. And now the dam had cracked. Jenny sent a longer message. "I didn't realize it felt that bad for you. You never said anything." That was always their line. You never said anything, as if silence meant approval, as if they weren't responsible for noticing. I typed a response, then deleted it. Instead, I opened a new message just to her. I didn't say anything because every time I tried, I was made to feel like I was causing problems. I stopped speaking because no one ever listened. She left it on read. Chris followed up a few minutes later with a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I couldn't. His words were usually too slick, too practiced. He always knew how to sound apologetic without actually changing anything. Then came the cousins. A few of them messaged me separately, saying they'd had no idea, that they were sorry. That they should have noticed, and maybe they should have, but at least some of them were trying now. I responded to Olivia again. "Thank you, not just for defending me, but for seeing me," she replied almost instantly. "You deserve better than what they gave you. Even if they never say it, I will." That's when I realized I hadn't done all of this for revenge. I hadn't wanted them to suffer. I hadn't hoped they'd end up in some seedy motel scrambling for Wi-Fi and arguing over whose fault it was. That part was just a byproduct. What I'd really wanted, what I'd needed, was to be seen. To remind them that I exist, that I wasn't just an invisible background character in their curated version of family. Later that afternoon, the host of the Airbnb texted me, saying someone named Jennifer had tried to reach them and seemed upset. I confirmed my reservation was still valid, thanked them for checking, and assured them everything was fine. It was fine. Better than fine. I walked through the house again, slowly this time, letting the messages sit. I didn't respond to all of them. Some I ignored entirely. Some I answered with short replies. I wasn't ready to have long conversations, not yet. Maybe not ever. But I did respond to Mom. "You don't have to appreciate it. You just have to understand it." No reply. That silence, at least, was familiar. But this time it didn't sting as much because for once I hadn't let it bury me. I wrote a note before bed, just a short one. Left it on the counter, under the decorative "Welcome to the Beach" sign. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to speak louder than you're comfortable with. This was my voice. Maybe now you'll hear it. I signed it with my real name, not Alexis. When the rental ended, I left the house early in the morning. I cleaned up, packed quietly, and locked the door behind me. I didn't take any souvenirs. I didn't look back. The house had done what it needed to do. It gave me space. Not just physical, but emotional. It gave me proof that I could take up room without asking first. The drive home felt lighter. The highway stretched out like a ribbon, and for once I didn't carry the weight of what-ifs or guilt. I didn't rehearse conversations in my head. I didn't replay the past. I just drove. When I got back to my apartment, I unpacked slowly. I watered my plants, fed the neighbor's cat I'd been looking after, and put my clothes straight into the laundry. I fell asleep on the couch, the ocean still echoing faintly in my mind. 2 days later, Chris texted, "Lunch sometime this week? Just you and me." That was new. We'd never hung out one-on-one. Not unless it involved helping him move or watching his kids. This was different. It felt like an offer, not a request. I told him yes, Not because I was ready to forgive, but because I was open to seeing if he'd show up as someone different. Then Jenny messaged too. "I've been thinking about everything. If you ever want to talk, I'll just listen." It wasn't an apology. But it was the first time she'd acknowledged my voice without trying to correct it. Even Mom, days later, sent something small. "Olivia told me some of what you shared. I'm sorry I didn't realize how much you were carrying. I should have. I read it 3 times before responding. Thank you, that means more than you know." I wasn't naive. One message wouldn't fix years of imbalance. But it didn't need to. The point was never to repair everything. It was to stop pretending that everything was fine. And now they couldn't pretend anymore. That changed the dynamic. I started noticing other shifts too. A cousin called just to check in. An aunt invited me to dinner and actually followed through. Even Olivia kept texting, just because she wanted to, not because she felt obligated. Little things, but little things add up. I didn't go looking for a big family reconciliation. I didn't write long posts about healing or post selfies with vague captions about growth. I just lived. I bought a new canvas and started painting again, something I hadn't done in months. I walked to the park more. I said no when I meant no, and yes only when I truly wanted to. There was peace in choosing myself without guilt. One evening, Chris and I sat across from each other at a quiet booth in a diner. He looked uncomfortable at first, unsure of how to begin, but he didn't deflect. "I didn't know you felt like you were always on the outside," he said. "But now that I think about it, yeah, I get it." I stirred my coffee. "You didn't want to get it before." "No," he admitted, "because that would have meant admitting I was part of it." That honesty mattered more than any sorry. We talked for over an hour, about childhood, about what we remembered differently, about how easy it is to fall into roles without questioning them. As I left that night, he hugged me, tighter than usual. No jokes, no sarcasm. Just quiet respect. I didn't need validation, but it felt good to be met halfway. Back at home, I looked around my apartment with new eyes, the same furniture, the same walls, but I felt different in it, more grounded, more present. I didn't need a vacation house to remind me of who I was, but that trip had cracked something open, and in its place, something stronger was beginning to take root. Something that said, I matter, even if I have to remind people sometimes, especially then. Looking back now, I realized that what happened at that beach house was never really about the trip itself. It was about every quiet moment I let myself go unnoticed, every time I let discomfort slide by for the sake of keeping peace. I spent years believing that being easygoing would earn me a seat at the table, that shrinking myself would make me easier to love. But all it did was make me invisible. Sometimes, you have to do something drastic to remind people that you're there, that you're not a piece of furniture to be arranged and forgotten, but a living, breathing presence, someone with feelings, with history, with a place that matters. Renting the Airbnb before my own family could wasn't about revenge, not really. It was a desperate attempt to take up space after so long being told, directly and indirectly, that I wasn't allowed to, that my voice was disruptive, that my needs were too much. For years I accepted the story I was given. I let silence pass for love and absence pass for normal. Now I see the truth. Love isn't silent. It's messy. It's full of missteps, awkward conversations, and moments of real honesty. It's not about pretending everything is fine or swallowing your hurt until it turns into resentment. Love is calling out the hard stuff, even when your voice shakes. Love is saying, I need you to see me, and trusting that the right people will. Not everyone will understand your boundaries. Some will resent them. Some will try to guilt you back into your old role. But you don't owe anyone your silence, not even family. Especially not family. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own life, in your own circle, I hope my story makes you feel a little less alone. Maybe it'll give you the push you need to speak up. Maybe you'll find your own way to reclaim the space you deserve. Sometimes you don't get the apology you need. Sometimes you have to be your own apology, your own proof that you matter. And sometimes all it takes is a single act of courage to set off a chain reaction. Mine just happened to be a little unorthodox. I don't regret it. If anything, I wish I'd spoken up sooner. The next time my family plans something, maybe they'll remember to reach out, maybe they won't. Either way, I know now that I don't have to wait around hoping to be noticed. I can make my own invitations. I can build my own peace. I can be loud about what I want without apologizing for it. To anyone out there feeling like the extra chair at the table, let this be your sign. Pull up your own chair. Make your own space. Don't wait for permission. And if you found any part of my story relatable or moving, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support means I can keep sharing stories that matter. Not just mine, but maybe yours too. There's so much more to life than waiting for someone else to give you value. Find it in yourself. Speak up. Take up space. And if you want to hear about the time I crashed a wedding to expose a secret affair, yeah, that happened too. Click the next video on your screen. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me, and I hope wherever you are, you remember that you're worth seeing too.